Hi guys, on this week's episode of In Conversation With, I speak to none other than my good friend, Mr. Jack J Hutchinson. It was great to chat with him, have a catch up with Jack. I hadn't seen him for a little while, so it was great to speak about his brand new album, The Hammer Falls, the release of that, the upcoming tour and support of it, everything behind that album, including, the writing process, the recording process, how Laz and Felipe have influenced him as a band. Having them at Just Push Play was an absolute honour, and they're such a tight unit. I'm really excited by this album, guys, and can't wait to hear it. It was great to chat with Jack, and you can see what we had to speak about now. And we're joined by my good friend, Mr. Jack J Hutchinson. How you keeping, Jack, man?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, all right, man. Doing all right. Before we get into talk about it, the last time I saw you properly was when you were playing at Just Push Play. So before we get into it properly, man, I just want to thank you again for playing and all your support of that last year. It meant the fucking world to me, dude.
Well, I think, it meant a lot to all the bands, mate, all your hard work to put on such an incredible lineup. And for us, it was really our first weekend back. It was an emotional gig. We'd been looking forward to that show for such a long time.
Yeah, you were in from the beginning.
And it was just such a great day, great stage, great crowd, and the organisation was brilliant. Yeah, it was a lot of fun was had by everyone that took part in it.
Bless you, man. Well, thanks again, dude, and hopefully get you back in the future.
Cool, man. Sounds good.
Cool. Well, when we air this interview, we'll be launching your new album at the Hammer Falls. How was the process different from between this and the last release? Because obviously you've been working on this one a little while.
Yeah, I think what I wanted to try and do with this release was get the band in a space and play together. So my previous two records, Paint No Fiction and Who Feeds the Wolf, were kind of done with session guys coming in and out and, recording guide acoustic tracks and then layering on drums. And it was all done in bits, which is fine. It's how a lot of bands make records. But for me, it was crucial to get in a nice big live room and actually do some proper pre-production so everybody knew the songs before we went into the studio, and just bash the songs out whilst we were there, and then do overdubs, overdub the lead guitar stuff and get the vocals down. So I wouldn't say it's a live record. It's definitely not a live record because there's a lot of production went into it, but to capture that initial energy was really what I set out to do, which was cool.
That's cool, man. So did Philippe and Laz respectively take part a bit more in the writing than session guys had previously, or was it still predominantly self-writing?
I think it was probably predominantly me that wrote the album. I wrote 8 of the 10 tracks myself, and then there's a track on there called The Raven's Crow, which I co-wrote with Laz, which was originally this sort of 8-minute sort of space jazz rock thing that was completely nuts. And when we got towards the end of the sessions, I was listening back to this track, and I kind of felt like it didn't really fit with the rest of the release. And over a weekend, basically wrote some lyrics and wrote some melody lines and wrote a big guitar solo, and we kind of redid it. And I'm really pleased that we did. And it's interesting, the album's gone out to the Kickstarter backers and Patreon backers that help fund it, essentially. And that's been one of the most popular songs. So the last song that we finished, and one of those, it was a bit of an afterthought, and it's turned into one of those favorites for people. But yeah, the rest of it I wrote myself. And so, I tend to do that in terms of my records. They're very personal pieces of art for me. The lyrics are often really kind of intimate experiences that I share quite intimate stuff, really, I suppose, through my lyrics, that I feel like I have to do, because I can't then go and tour something for 2 years unless I've really invested in what I'm singing about. So yeah, it was a slightly different experience, but predominantly very similar to the previous 2 records.
I mean, like you say, you've always written stuff that's been quite personal. You've written songs about your dad, obviously, and his sort of health and the rest of it, and other personal experiences that you've been through throughout life. Is there any sort of thing that kicked off this, like an overall theme behind the album, or is it just, what you've been through the last couple of years, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, what I wanted to try and avoid was writing a bunch of songs about being in lockdown and the pandemic. And obviously this album was written, really, I think the first track I wrote for the release was Angel of Death, which I wrote maybe 4 or 5 weeks into the pandemic. So I was stuck in my flat. A lot of the lyrics are about kind of being trapped within the confines of this sort of intimate space and wanting to break free from it. And so I guess that song does kind of deal a little bit with everything we've been through over the last couple of years. But most of it, I think you can't write things that are too specific, because then it won't necessarily connect with other people. So it's about taking those personal experiences and transforming them, evolving them into a dialogue with your audience that they can all kind of grasp. And hopefully I've achieved that with the majority of these songs. I had thoughts at one point about trying to make it more of a concept album. I've never really done anything like that. And I wrote a song called Gunslinger, which actually was referencing a lot of Stephen King, Dark Tower book stuff. And I kind of got so far with that one. And then I thought, God, this is hard work. I'm just going to keep writing how I normally do. So, yeah, that's a bit of a one-off, I reckon, on the record.
Oh, so Gunslinger still made it to the record then?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it's a great tune. For me, it sounds a little bit like my song "Kiss Your Ass Goodbye," and it's kind of for me, a better version of that track. But I remember doing the vocals on Gunslinger, where we actually did the vocals for that in a different studio to where we recorded the bulk of the record, which was down at Momentum in Plymouth. But we went over to Anchor Baby Studios over in Kent, and I did one day of vocal tracking. And Gunslinger was great because it was Dan Lucas, who was doing the stuff over at the Anchor Baby, just kept telling me, sing with more venom, sing with more venom. And I think there's a lot of attitude in that vocal that I'm really proud of.
Oh, cool. Sometimes the attitude is what carries over delivery, don't it? Some of my favourite vocal lines and also favourite singers aren't necessarily, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Aerosmith fan, so obviously I do like singers who've got vocal capability, but equally you listen to something like, Alice in Chains, Down in the Hole or something like that, and Lane wasn't necessarily the best vocalist in terms of notes he could hit, though he could hit them, but it was all about the attitude and the delivery behind it with stuff like that. So yeah, man, sometimes the attitude's the main thing.
Yeah, I mean, like one of my favorite artists, Neil Young, he's got kind of a unique voice that I think a lot of people really love, but then some people find it really grates on them. And his new album Barn, I've been listening to that a lot over the last couple of weeks, and his vocals on that are really sort of raw and fragile, and they break and they wobble a bit and that kind of thing, but it sounds like a human voice, which I think sometimes modern production kind of gets rid of. Everything sounds like it. I'll tell you what it sounds like, actually. I was watching some cartoons with my niece over Christmas, and a lot of these cartoons have music in them now, and the voices just sound like robots to me. And unfortunately, a lot of modern production can make bands sound like that because they're too reliant on overproducing things. And I was really quite keen to avoid that with the production on this record. And it's interesting you mention Aerosmith, because Aerosmith are one of my favorite bands, and they've always had this kind of big, particularly the modern day Aerosmith, this big sound, the big production, where it sounds really polished in lots of respects, but it doesn't lose that kind of
slight sort of jagged tooth edge to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't want Joe Perry's guitar solos to be edited
never
within an inch of their life. You want it to sound like Joe Perry. You want Steven Tyler to sound like Steven Tyler. So it'd be easy to just go in the studio, sing something and sing it really, really badly, and then get the producer to fix everything, which I'd rather sing something 20 times and get it right than be there forever fixing vocal lines and put them in tune. It's not really what I'm about. So
no,
yeah.
But like you say, when people are doing that, and like you say, there's a lot of modern productions that will utilize those techniques, and a lot of more mainstream acts that would utilize it as well, because it's easier. They can flick a switch or whatever, and tune, make everything sound bang on note perfect. But for me, it's like you say, it's the human side that you hear, and it's really obvious from because I'm someone who, the reason I connect with your music is, like you were saying, it's personal, it's from the soul, it's from the heart, and that's why I connect with any artist. There's got to be singing from thing, and if you're not hearing that human aspect, it just completely sort of dissipates. It can write the best song in the world, but if that human aspect isn't with it, then it just sort of dissipates after a while. For me, you've got to have that connection, like you were talking about earlier, really.
Well, I think it just makes everything sound the same as well. So there's a lot of music that, don't get me wrong, there's tons of great music
Oh
out
yeah, of
there
course
now.
there is.
But sometimes you just hear really similar production on stuff. But Josiah Manning, who's done the mixing on my record, he did a great job, and it was interesting because Josiah wasn't really part of the actual recording process. So we set out to kind of produce the record ourselves, which I'd never really done before.
Okay.
And people had warned me against doing that. It was like, concentrate on doing your guitar and singing rather than everything else. But we kind of co-produced it with this guy from Momentum, Josh, who he did a great job. He did a great job of actually kind of reining in the band and our crazy ideas that we could have been there for 3 years. It could have become our Chinese Democracy, this record, to be fair. So it was almost like we finished it, Josh reined it in, and we handed it over to Josiah, who then he did some great stuff on there. He actually played some guitar on the record, and he would Zoom call me and go, I've just had a few ideas about this track, and like one of the tracks, Halo, which is the new single. He played some great guitar on that tune, and he was very kind of polite about it and was very gentle about putting in these suggestions. And I was all for it. I think it was good to get a different guitarist viewpoint on things, because I never really worked with other guitar players.
I was going to say, other than obviously like the stuff you did with HRH stuff, you've never had any sort of that sort of relationship, I guess, on any of your solo records, have you?
Not really. I always end up falling out with guitar players. I don't know what it is. It's probably me. I think I just end up I have too much ego, Lee, and then I just fall out with them. So yeah, I tend to do all the guitars myself. But because we'd sort of finished the recording process and then left it all with Josiah down at Momentum, like a lot of things in the last 18 months, it was all done remotely. So, quick Skype phone call, Zoom call, whatever, we could sort stuff out. And it was really wicked. You just do a video call and he's playing guitar in the studio and you're part of the process, but you're 200 miles away. So that was quite cool. And I guess in kind of contrast to the initial way that we recorded this stuff. So there's two elements to it, which was this kind of live vibe that we got at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then we spent 8 months putting the icing on the cake, which I think is the best way to do it, rather than going in and trying to do the icing on the cake before you built the cake, that sort of thing. But yeah, it sounds good to me.
So how did you feel about it when you first, being honest, when you first came to you and said, I've got an idea? Were you open to it, or was it once you heard the pieces that he'd done that you were more open to it?
I think I was really trusting in Josiah because I was really keen to work with him based on the production he'd done with obviously Chris Barras, because he's been in Chris's band for the last few years, and he'd also recently done the Inglorious records. So
I didn't realise he'd done that.
Yeah, man, and so I was quite keen to have his input. And I remember actually standing outside Momentum in the middle of the summer and him sort of talking about the mixing stage, and he said, if I've got a few ideas on how to add flourishes to tracks that might add a little bit of a different vibe, what do you want me to do? And I said, I trust you to make a judgment call on it, but if it's too drastic, obviously just give me a call and we can talk it through. But he did a great job, and the one thing I wanted was this album. It had to sound different to the previous records because the songwriting was, I went down a heavier sort of rock route. And so part of the reason that I didn't go with my previous producer, which is Tony Peretta down in South London, and he's a brilliant producer, Tony. He did great work on Paint No Fiction and Who Feeds a Wolf. But I wanted to try somebody who was more kind of along that kind of heavy rock route.
Yeah.
And so it was going to bring out that sort of multi-layered kind of, I guess at some points in terms of the guitar stuff, that kind of harmonic operatic guitar element as well, which I think Josiah is really good at doing. So yeah, it sounded cool.
That's cool, man. Do you think that the sort of heavier side of things came out because obviously you've been spending a lot of time on the road with Philip and Laz, and as a rhythm section, having watched you guys live, they're real heavy, they're heavy hitters themselves. Philip's does not hold back. You think that fed into wanting to do a more heavier rock-based album then, or was it always a plan after Who Feeds the Wolf to do a more heavier album?
I think it was probably the result of spending much of 2019 just feeling very angry with the world. And so the time pre-pandemic, I I went through quite a lot of sort of personal crap that, you know, nobody needs to hear much about that. But, you know, I was drinking too much. I was on tour pretty much the whole year. So I kind of ended up right at the end of 2019 just feeling totally fried. And I toured my album, and, you know, I was pleased with how that year had gone, kind of on a professional sense. But it's weird, man, because it's a real cliche as a musician to be on tour and get addicted to booze or drugs or something like that. And so, you know, I always used to laugh at people that would say stuff like that. But that's kind of what happened to me really that year. And so I gave up alcohol at the end of 2019, and I've not drank since, actually. So I've just marked 2 years off the booze, which, for me, anybody that followed me for the first couple of years of my career would know that that is something of an achievement. But I think what happened was the fallout of 2019 was I wrote a lot of songs really at the start of 2020 that were kind of, I was upset about a lot of stuff. I was trying to deal with things, and then the pandemic hit and it kind of pushed me further down that kind of dark route. And it actually took me a little while to get over it. And I think I got over it through writing an album, and that's, I think The Hammer Falls is the result of it. I mean, even the blooming artwork looks kind of melancholic and doomy, but I don't know. I'm in a much better place now, so maybe the next album is going to sound like Steps. Who knows?
You said you're in a better place, mate, not a crap place.
Yeah, man. It's going to be all like Natalie Imbruglia covers or something, but yeah.
You speaking of the album artwork, though, man, you did a recent, well, it was the other day when you showed off the vinyl when we were chatting. The vinyl looks absolutely brilliant, man. When you did that on packaging, it looked great.
Yeah, man. It's again, I wanted there to be a different vibe with the vinyl. I'd done this splatter effect on my last two records, and it's interesting because when I did Who Feeds the Wolf on vinyl wasn't as like this thing. Everybody does vinyl now, but when I put that, I remember doing the order for that and thinking, this will kind of stand my album out from the rest. But everybody does these kind of splatter vinyls now. But so it's got this kind of marble effect that was supposed to kind of look like you're being sucked into a kind of black hole, kind of spacey void or something. I don't know. There was a conceptual element to this decision making, Lee, but nobody will think that. They'll just think it looks like Ben and Jerry's ice cream, I think. Yeah, it looks pretty wicked. And the artwork, which was done by this chap called Anastasio over in Spain, he has a company called Revelation Studio, and he actually does artwork for Blasco from Ozzy Osbourne's band.
Oh yeah.
And that's I follow Blasco on Instagram, and I saw this artwork, and I thought, well, I'll drop him a message on Instagram and see if he would be happy to do some of my stuff. And the first thing I always remember, the first thing he said to me was, "I need to listen to your music first." So
that's pretty cool.
You know, I've had that previously where people just go, "Yeah, man, give me 300 quid and I'll do some artwork for you." But he really listened to the tracks that we hadn't finished the album at that point, but he listened to about 6 tracks and said, "I'm getting a visual accompaniment for this album. I'm coming up with it." And he sent me some rough designs soon, and I just thought they were wicked. Some of them were far more bloody than the one that ended up on the cover, and I was like, I want my mum to be able to listen to this album and be proud of me. So we had to tone it down ever so slightly, but yeah, I'm super pleased with it.
That's cool that he was that invested, though, man. Because like you say, like I know, obviously, you know, my wife Jo, she's an artist and stuff, and there's people that she knows that's been doing stuff, and she got asked over Christmas time to do or on the lead up to Christmas to do a commission for customer first. But what the guy wanted was a much more kind of street arty type thing, which is not what Jo does. You know, she's all pencil portraits and stuff. But she put the guy in contact with Deggy at Gorilla Right, because he does all this sort of street arty type stuff. And you know, it's nice when someone's like that emotionally invested that they would take the time to listen to your music, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's done a lot of work. Yeah, absolutely, and he's done most of my work since there. He's done tour posters. He's done all the single artwork, and he actually sent me some stuff through earlier on today, which is for an EP I'm working on that will come out at the end of this year. So yeah, really pleased with it.
And stuff as well, don't you?
Yeah, but I'm not nowhere near as good as him. I mean, I actually make abstract tiny drawings which would look absolutely shocking on an album cover. It would just look like actually they're very similar to the kind of Devendra Banhart covers. I don't know if you've seen those, but yeah, I mean, I prefer to have something that, you know, like what Anastasia's done, which is just a massive skull with a hammer next to it. I think that looks a bit more badass.
It certainly does look badass, man. Yeah, Joe wanted me to just drop you a line. We'll edit this out of the interview, but she's doing her own podcast of musicians v art type thing. She wanted to know if you were up for a chat at any point.
Yeah, man, that'd be wicked. Yeah.
I'll let her get in touch with you because that's her thing. But she said, well, want to say hello while I was talking to you, and two, to ask if you'd be up for an hour about that sort of things.
Of course, yeah, that'd be really good.
Cool. Well, I'll let her know. But yeah, getting back to your album though, obviously you were heavily touring sort of latter part of, well, last year now, 2021, and then you've already got the dates lined up. Is it February the tour kicks off, isn't it?
Yeah, we're doing like a short album launch tour in February, and then yeah, we're doing some stuff in Spain, and then I'm going to America for a little bit, and then we're doing like a return UK tour. I think it's late September, early October. So we've kind of split the tour into two this year.
Okay. Yeah.
Part of the reason behind that was I'm getting married in April, so I needed some time to get ready for that. So, but also the thinking was that, you know, as everybody is trying to gauge how COVID is going and the pandemic, if you lump everything in one go, and then it unfortunately times with everything being shut down, then we're a bit screwed. So I'm you know, we should be all right by October. But yeah, we're doing some dates in Feb, and we're doing the album launch show at the O2 Academy in Islington, which should be really cool. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh man, that's a great venue. What date's the Islington one? I have to come down to that.
It's the 3rd of Feb, that one.
3rd of Feb.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. I'll have to come down to that.
And I played there a couple of years back when we did the Earache album launch for New Wave of Rock and Roll, which was really cool. And yeah, it was wicked. That it was about 2 weeks before Boris was on TV shutting the country down, and it was like we were all backstage having beers and kind of going, "Oh, you know, this is great, isn't it?" And then saying, "Oh, do you reckon is this about this pandemic? What's going on?" And then 2 weeks later, it's like everybody's off tour, everybody's at home, everybody's watching Cobra Kai. It was like that. It's all shut down.
I would say I remember having a very similar conversation with Deggy, because I think it was the same weekend that I was at our Planet Rock Winners End Festival. Right. And obviously by which point Gorilla Eye were booked on, and me and the guys hooked up for a beer like that, and there's me, Arjun and Deggy all talking, and Lee, do you think this thing will affect Just Push Play? And I'm going, oh, well, it bollocks. Like, it's not even come to the country yet, mate. Like, whatever happens, it's going to be a couple of weeks thing, yeah, all go away. No one will be talking about it in a month. You know, we got 6-7 months till Just Push Play, I'll be fine. And then 5-6 months later, I'm going, shit, I'm going to have to postpone Just Push Play for a year. So,
yeah, gosh.
It shows how much I knew at the time.
Well, I mean, I'm an inherently positive person usually. So, apart from 2019, which is almost like my kind of blackout phase, but I was a bit like, oh, it'll go on for 3 weeks, it'll be a month, whatever.
Yeah.
But you know, the pandemic, actually, for me personally, it's kind of been a positive experience, really. I feel like I spent a lot of time reflecting on who I was, who I became, reflecting on what it meant to be a touring musician and how I mentally dealt with that. And I wrote a really kick-ass album, I think. So, you know, it's been tough. And obviously, I know a lot of people that have been affected by it health-wise.
Yeah.
But on a creative level, it's been a really good thing for me. So yeah, it's an odd one to look back on it now, and we're still in it really in many ways, but it's like it's a conflicting set of emotions really, because obviously it's miserable what's happened, but creatively I've got a lot out of it. So yeah, again, annoyingly positive, I suppose, Lee.
Do you think, like, as you say, like normally you would have spent a lot more of time out on the road, touring stuff and gigging heavily as you normally would? Do you think that because you obviously couldn't do that, they gave you more space than you would normally allow for the writing process as such?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the last 2 records were written in a really kind of chaotic way, where I was writing stuff. I mean, again, it's one of those things that a lot of touring musicians say, oh, I wrote this song in a hotel room, but that is literally where you do it, because you get back to your hotel room after you've played a show and you can't get to sleep because you've got all this adrenaline from the gig. And I sit awake for 3 hours afterwards doing nothing. I mean, I just sit there noodling on my guitar, and then you come up with song ideas at 3 a.m, which is even worse, because then you can't go to sleep because you're excited about the fact you've written this new song, which is it's horrible. But you know, I've written songs. I remember Justified off Who Feeds the Wolf, which I wrote in Russia, and that was just after I'd landed in Russia, played a show, went back to the accommodation and wrote. I didn't write the whole song. I wrote the riff and the verses and stuff. But with this one, obviously, I wasn't on the road, so I spent all the time. You know, as soon as we could, actually, we started going to a rehearsal space near me in Welwyn Garden City and bashing out some ideas. So it was like, okay, we've got time now, because we're not running after gigs. We're not chasing our shadow, trying to keep on top of stuff.
Yeah.
And so the songs evolved in a really kind of organic way that I never had happened before. And you because we did proper pre-production, you can assess elements on the songs that can be improved. So you go, oh, actually, this bridge bit is really boring. Let's get rid of it or change it. Previously, it was like, right, I'm back from the Czech Republic. I've got 2 weeks until I go back to Spain. I need to record everything now.
Yeah.
Which is, it's not much. I wouldn't say it's not much fun. It's just a different sort of fun. It's much better to do proper pre-production and go into an amazing studio with a really great producer, and then create something that you know is really good. And that's what I feel about this record. I think with the previous ones, I put them out and felt a bit nervous about certain tracks and feeling a bit, is this the best that I can achieve? Whereas with this, I know that this is a record that I would listen to. And that's kind of the aim all the time. Is people go, oh, how do you know what is a good song? Actually, the only way I know it's a good song is if I would want to listen to it myself.
Yeah.
So that's what I feel with this new album.
That's great, man. And obviously on this coming tour, you get to share beds again with Mr. Della.
Yeah, we all got a bit creepy actually on the last one, where Johnny was it the second to last gig? It was quite towards the end, and you do end up feeling a little bit fried actually at the end. And when you see, it's like when you run like a I don't know, like a 10K or something, and you can see the finish line ahead of you, and your knees start to go wobbly, and you start doing stuff that you shouldn't really be doing. And I remember that we finished this gig in St Austell, and we drove out of St Austell, and we hit a deer in the countryside driving out of and it was really weird. What a weird night, because it was like comic timing, obviously not for the deer, which was horrific, but I was just sat there going, I'll tell you what, we should be really proud of this tour. And tonight was one of the best gigs on the tour. And then we hit this blooming deer. It was like this thing jumped out of nowhere. So we managed to get to the hotel, and we were just like, we ended up watching some Morecambe and Wise clips on YouTube. And Johnny was just in hysterics laughing about it. And he ended up climbing into bed with me when we were watching this thing on my iPad underneath the covers. And then about 20 minutes went by, and I said, do you know what, mate? Can you go and get back into your bed? Because I'm going to have to speak to Liz about this tomorrow. It was like we were going to fall asleep in one another's arms, the romantic times on the JJH tour.
Well, Morecambe and Wise shared a bed, didn't they? So
yeah, we didn't do the breakfast scene though the following morning, unfortunately, in the premiering restaurant. But there you go.
There you go. So, other than the aforementioned album and everything, what is the sort of plans for the foreseeable for yourself, mate, other than touring?
Well, I've been working on some new stuff over the last couple of months, which I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it yet. I've done 4 tracks with Kevin Shirley, who obviously he's worked with Aerosmith. He did 9 Lives. He's done By Your Side, the Black Crowes, all the Led Zeppelin stuff. And, he's obviously really well known for the Iron Maiden production as well. So that opportunity came up just before we went on tour. And it was a bit of a mad, and this is going to contradict what I've just said about rushing in and doing things. But I'd done 3 tracks, and then he basically did some production on that. And I was like, right, need a 4th track. So I wrote this song like in about 2 days, and then we went in and we actually did it the day before we started the tour. So we'd had a rehearsal, and I was like, right guys, on Friday we're going to Kent, and we're going to go to Anchor Baby and record this song, everything in 6 hours, and then it's going to be sent to Sydney, where Kevin Shirley is going to mix it remotely,
Wow.
And we're going to put it. The plan was to put it out as a vinyl, just that one track, and but we've ended up with 4 tracks. So I'm not quite sure. It might be an EP, but it was great to work with Kevin, who, he's been a hero of mine for 25 years. So the songs are kind of different, man. They're quite, Kevin likes stuff to be a band playing. He doesn't like this whole going in and fixing stuff. So I think that chimed pretty well with what we want to do. And so, yeah, I mean, Laz, my bass player, is a big Iron Maiden fan.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
And so when I told him Kevin was going to work on some tracks, it was like, it reminded me a little bit of me when I got a Hulk Hogan figure in 1989 for my birthday. It was like, oh my God, Laz was so excited. So that'll come out at the end of this year, I reckon. We've actually shot a music video. We did that over in Bristol, an arts venue called The Island, just before Christmas. So the reason I did that just before Christmas was like, by the time we come back after Christmas, lads, we'll have all had about 4 Christmas dinners. So it's better to do the music video before that. And then, yeah, I mean, I've started writing my next record the last couple of weeks. But it's very early stages with that. Probably go in at the end of the year and try and do some recording. It sounds very different, actually. Every album I've done, I've tried to come up with something, and it's not an intentional thing to make it sound different, but you want to try and, there's no point me rewriting Deal with the Devil or Justify. I need to write some new stuff. So the stuff I've done the last couple of weeks has been very acoustic based and kind of mellow, Neil Young Harvest type stuff. So maybe I'll do an Americana album next. Who knows? I'll get bored of it though, and then I'll just chime out a load of Iron Maiden and Zepp riffs in about 3 weeks. But that's part of the process as well.
Of course it is, man. How did Kevin Shirley think of it? Obviously, he's a big Aerosmith fan. I love his production. So how did that come about, man?
I've been sending him letters since 1998 after 9 Lives came out every couple of weeks going, please produce my tracks. No, he actually did a call out on Instagram back in, I think it was August, saying, for like young and up and coming bands to get in touch, he'll do some work for them. Nice. And I mean, he clearly didn't look at my Instagram because the young element didn't really apply to me. But yeah, and so I messaged him. I didn't actually hear back initially, and I thought, wow, maybe he doesn't really like my stuff. But then he got back, and one of the tracks that he mixed, he particularly liked that one. So yeah, it was really exciting when he said, I got this email at like 3 a.m. My iPhone pinged, and my partner Liz was like, God, do turn off the notifications on your phone. And I was like, Kevin Shirley's just agreed to do some work on these tracks. So it was a really nice way to kind of, because we just finished doing all the mixing and mastering on the new record. So it meant that I had a bit of a clear head to then start working on something new as well. Whereas if he'd messaged me halfway through mixing, I think it would have thrown that sort of out of whack a little bit. So yeah, it's cool, and hopefully people dig it when it comes out. And I mean, potentially that might be like a 4-track vinyl record, do it as a 12-inch maybe, but I might write a bunch more songs and then it turns into an album. We'll see. Yeah, so it's early days at the minute.
That's great though, dude. That's well cool. That must have been fucking mental to get an email like that at 3 a.m. I've been
I initially thought in my delirious state, well, is it real? But it's it'd be really cool if Kevin can do the next album, but we'll see about that. That wasn't what the offer was, so it was to do a couple of tracks, and then turned into 4 tracks. He initially did 1 track, and then I got back to him and said, can you squeeze in and do another 3? So, because I was thinking, just 1 track, what do you do with 1 track? It's just a one-off single, but 4 tracks is a little EP. So, yeah, pretty cool. And as I said, like, he's produced some of these albums that I've had on various times over the last 24 years, like the Black Crowes Jimmy Page record, which Kevin worked on. I mean, that was like a super early record for me that I was obsessed with. I was learning all the tracks off there. I mean, my brother who was in the room next to me would testify. I probably ruined his teenage years with that record. He says to me he still can't listen to Led Zeppelin, so I used to jam along. I could just play along with it from start to finish, and I just loved it. And he, in many ways, that record sounded better than Zepp albums. It was so heavy and so kind
Really
of
raw
clean.
as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a great piece of work. You know, and then through to all the Iron Maiden stuff, which actually I bought Iron Maiden albums over the years, and I kind of never really connected with them. But in lockdown last year, I don't know what happened. I just went full Maiden, and Laz was taking the piss out of me actually, because he's like, "What Maiden record have you bought this week?" Because I was into all the early Maiden stuff, obviously, when I was a teenager, but when I was a teenager, the new stuff, that new era hadn't begun. So when they kind of came back with, you know, that series of records when Bruce rejoined, I just didn't really...
Dance to Death and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I didn't really listen to him. And so I was like, fucking hell, I made a bit of an error there. So I was like full-blown Maiden last year. So I think that infused the songwriting on the new record. I mean, there's a track on here called What Doesn't Kill You Only Makes You Stronger, which is definitely Maiden influenced. And I wouldn't have written that 2 years ago. So had the pandemic not happened and my, you know, my Maiden period for about 3 months last summer, I wouldn't have written some of the songs that I've now written. I'd have actually probably just finished touring my last record right now. And I'd be like, crap, I need to write a new album. So, yeah.
That's cool, man. So for anyone who's listening who's not yet bought your album, obviously we're doing this as an album launch show, mate. Platform's yours, dude. What would you say to anyone out there who's listening who maybe not have purchased the album yet?
Just illegally download it. I think it's on loads of different sites now. Anyway, no, if you go to iSaw.com, it's on the iSaw website, and you can also you can stream it via Ear 8 Records. There's a link basically on all my socials with those two websites. If you go to Jack J Hutchinson on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you'll be able to find the links to purchase the album.
Great, man. Well, I'll encourage anyone to listen to it as always, dude, and we'll spin whatever we can. At the beginning of the interview, we're going to play Straight to Hell off the album, but what song of yours would you like us to play at the end of the interview?
Halo, I think, because that's the single that will be coming out 28th of Jan. So it's, yeah, that's got a video that Chris Barris shot. So that was quite an interesting day.
Well, Chris Barris shot a video for it?
Yeah, he does film work as well.
Oh, yeah, of course. He's done a few of his own, hasn't he?
Yeah, it was it was like, yeah, it was quite an intense day. Chris is like a proper filmmaker. And he, you know, it was like, if you did a shot, he'd actually got like a script of what he wanted to be. Whereas usually with music videos, I'm just like, let's just try and act cool and throw my arms around a bit. So by the end of the day, I was absolutely fucking knackered. And, you can see it was like Chris applies his fighting days to both his music, but also his filmmaking. Where I felt like I was Robert De Niro or something in Taxi Driver at points. It was a bit.
That's good, man. All right, man. Well, we'll play Halo. Thanks again for your time as always, Jack, man. It's an absolute pleasure, dude.
Yeah, thanks, Lee, and thanks for doing this, man. And
no worries.
I wish I'd known you were going to wear that hat, because I could have worn mine and we could have been hat buddies.
All right, buddy. Cheers, bud.
All right, man. Nice to see you.
You too.